The city was always loud, full of honking cars, people rushing to work, and the faint sound of street musicians trying to earn a few coins. In the middle of all that noise, a little girl stood at the same corner every day. Her clothes were worn out, her shoes had holes, and her hair was messy from the wind. But her eyes were full of something different, something gentle, like a quiet song only she could hear. She spent her days cleaning car windows at traffic lights and collecting whatever spare change kind people offered. Most people didn't notice her. They were too busy looking at their phones or thinking about their own lives. But she didn't mind much. She had something that made her day special. A small music school right across the street. Every evening, when the sky turned orange and the city lights began to glow, she would stop working and walk to that music school. She would stand outside its window, her small hands pressed against the glass, listening to the sound of a piano playing inside. The music filled her heart in a way she couldn't explain. She didn't know how to read notes or even how a piano really worked, but she remembered every sound. Her ears picked up every note, every pause, every rhythm, like her mind was storing them away carefully. She never missed a single evening. Even on the days when it rained and the streets were muddy, she stood there, soaked but smiling, as the melody from inside warmed her. Sometimes she would close her eyes and move her fingers in the air, pretending to play along with the music she heard. She looked so focused that a few passers-by stopped to watch, but then moved on, thinking it was just a child's fantasy. One night, the rain came down heavier than usual. The girl was standing there again, shivering, watching the lights flicker inside the school. The students were leaving one by one, carrying their instruments and laughing as they ran to their cars. She didn't move until the last light went off and the door closed. She was about to walk back to her little shelter near the market when an old janitor from the school stepped out with a broom in his hand. He noticed her standing in the rain, her eyes still fixed on the piano inside. He walked closer and asked softly, "Why are you always here, little one?" The girl hesitated, unsure if she should speak. Then she whispered, "I just want to know how it feels to touch those keys once." The janitor looked at her for a moment, his heart melting at the honesty in her voice. He could see she wasn't begging for money or food. She wanted something else, something pure. After a short pause, he smiled gently and said, "Come inside, just for a moment." Her eyes widened. She looked around nervously, as if she was afraid someone would stop her. But the old man nodded again, and that was enough. She followed him inside. For the first time in her life, she stepped into the world she had only watched from the outside. The warm air, the faint smell of polished wood, and the sight of the grand piano in the middle of the hall made her heart race. The janitor switched on a small lamp near the piano. The room was quiet now, only the sound of rain tapping against the windows. "Go ahead," he said. "Just be gentle." She slowly walked toward the piano, her steps unsure. She reached out and touched the smooth white keys with the tips of her fingers. It felt cold at first, then strangely alive, like the instrument was breathing. She pressed one key, and a single note echoed through the room. Her eyes widened in amazement. She pressed another and another. The sound was beautiful, so much richer than she had imagined. She sat on the piano bench, her legs barely reaching the pedals. The janitor leaned against the wall, watching quietly. The girl closed her eyes, remembering the melody she heard every evening from outside. Then, slowly, she began to press the keys, one by one, following the rhythm in her memory. The tune was rough, a little uneven, but it was real. She was actually playing. The janitor's eyes softened. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. This child, who had never taken a single lesson, was playing a song she had only heard through a window. Her little hands moved with surprising grace. She played with her heart more than her fingers. The sound wasn't perfect, but it carried something that perfection never could, pure feeling. When she finished, she looked up shyly, almost apologizing with her eyes. "Did I do it wrong?" she asked. The janitor shook his head slowly. "No," he said with a smile. "You did it just right." Her face lit up. For a moment, she forgot the cold streets, the long days, and the hunger. In that warm, quiet room, she wasn't a street girl anymore. She was a musician. She stayed there for a few more minutes, pressing random keys, giggling each time a note surprised her. It was as if the piano was speaking back to her, sharing a secret language only she could understand. Before leaving, the janitor told her, "If you promise to come after the lessons are done, I'll let you play for a few minutes every night. But you must be quiet and careful." She nodded eagerly, her smile brighter than ever. "I promise," she said. From that night on, the music school became her second home. After finishing her small street chores, she would sneak inside once everyone had left. The janitor would be mopping the floors while she sat at the piano, lost in her own little world. Sometimes she played softly so as not to disturb anyone, and sometimes she let her heart out fully, filling the empty hall with emotion. Her progress was fast. She could repeat entire melodies after hearing them just once. She played with emotion that could not be taught. The janitor began to realize this girl had something rare. Every night he listened, shaking his head in wonder, thinking, "She's not just talented, she's born for this." Weeks passed, and one night, one of the teachers stayed late to pick up something he had forgotten. As he walked through the hallway, he heard the piano. The sound was hauntingly beautiful. He stopped, thinking it was a recording, but when he peeked inside, he saw the little girl sitting at the piano, completely focused, her hands moving gracefully. The janitor stood nearby, silently nodding along. The teacher didn't interrupt. He just listened until the girl stopped playing and looked up in surprise. He walked in slowly and said, "That was incredible. Who taught you to play?" She shook her head shyly. "No one," she said. "I just listen and remember." The teacher looked at her with amazement. "Do you know what you just did? You played by ear, and you played with emotion that most trained students struggle to find." The girl didn't fully understand his words, but she could tell from his tone that he meant something good. She smiled, her eyes shining. The teacher turned to the janitor and said, "She has real talent. She shouldn't be practicing in secret. She deserves a chance." From that night on, things began to change. The teacher spoke to the school's director about her, though not everyone agreed. Some said she didn't belong in a place like that she was just a child from the streets. But the teacher insisted. "Music doesn't care where you come from," he said. "It only listens to your heart." The girl had no idea about these conversations. She continued to come every night, just happy to play for a few minutes before going back to her little shelter. The piano keys had become her closest friends. When she played, she felt safe. When she closed her eyes, she could see a world where she didn't have to beg or hide, only play. One night, as she was about to leave, the janitor stopped her and said, "You know, there's a music contest coming up in the city next month. It's big, lots of schools take part. Maybe you should try." She looked at him, confused. "But I don't belong there," she said softly. He smiled. "Maybe you do. Maybe that's exactly where you belong." She didn't answer, but the idea stayed with her all night. As she lay under her small blanket, she thought about the piano, the stage, and the people listening. She imagined playing her heart out, just like she did in the empty hall. The thought scared her, but it also made her smile. She didn't know it yet, but that small corner where she used to stand every evening was about to become a memory. Her journey from the streets to the stage was just beginning. And soon, the world would hear what she had kept inside her heart all along. The sound of a dream that refused to die. The nights at the music school became the happiest part of her life. Every evening, once the students left and the lights dimmed, she quietly walked in through the side door. The janitor would nod at her, pretending not to see her when anyone else was around, but always leaving the piano room unlocked. It became their little secret, a hidden world where she could be herself. She would sit on the piano bench, her feet barely touching the ground, and press the keys gently. Each sound still amazed her. Sometimes she played melodies she had heard from outside the window, and other times, she created new ones of her own. They weren't perfect, but they were real. Every note came from her heart, shaped by the things she had lived through. The cold nights, the hunger, the kindness of strangers, and the dreams she carried deep inside. The janitor often pretended to clean while she played, sweeping slowly, listening carefully. Some nights he even forgot to work, standing near the door, completely lost in the music. It wasn't fancy or professional, but there was something special about it. Something raw and honest. One night, after she finished playing, he said softly, "You know, when you play, it feels like the piano is telling your story." She looked at him with a small smile and said, "Maybe it is. Maybe the piano understands me better than people do." From then on, she practiced more seriously. She would close her eyes and repeat one tune over and over until it sounded right. The janitor found some old sheet music in the storage room and gave it to her, though she couldn't read the notes. Instead, she made up her own system. She drew little marks on paper, shapes that reminded her which sounds belonged where. It was her secret language with the piano. Sometimes she stayed longer than she should have. The janitor would warn her, "If anyone finds out, I could lose my job." She would nod, feeling guilty, but the love of playing always pulled her back. The sound of the keys became her escape from everything else in life. One evening, while she was playing softly, a voice came from behind her. "Who's there?" It wasn't the janitor, it was one of the teachers. She froze. Her hands stopped on the keys, her heart beating fast. She turned slowly and saw a man holding a folder, looking at her with surprise. He walked closer, confused but curious. "Were you the one playing just now?" She nodded shyly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." The teacher didn't speak for a moment. He looked at the piano, then back at her. "That was beautiful," he said finally. "Where did you learn to play?" She hesitated. "Nowhere. I just... listen." The teacher raised his eyebrows. "You play by ear?" She nodded again. He smiled a little, shaking his head in disbelief. "Do you know how rare that is? Most students here can't play like that even after years of training." The girl didn't fully understand, but she could tell from his tone that he was impressed. He asked her to play something again, and though she was nervous, she did. Her fingers trembled at first, but then the melody flowed. It was a song she had made up, one that sounded a little sad but ended with hope. The teacher listened quietly, his eyes soft. When she finished, there was silence for a moment. Then he said, "You have a gift, child. You really do." From that night on, things changed. The teacher began staying after hours once in a while, pretending to work late just so he could listen to her play. Sometimes he gave her tips, simple ones like how to sit properly or how to move her fingers. But most of the time, he just let her play freely. He didn't want to take away her natural way of learning. The janitor noticed too. "Looks like you've found someone else who believes in you," he said one night with a grin. She laughed softly, saying, "I think so." Her playing grew better each week. The melodies became smoother, her rhythm more confident. She started feeling something new, like maybe she wasn't just pretending to be a pianist anymore. Maybe she really was one. One evening, the teacher brought in a small recording device and said, "Let's record you playing. I want others to hear this." She shook her head quickly. "No, please. I can't. People will laugh at me." He smiled. "No one will laugh. Trust me." She was scared but agreed. He pressed the red button and she began to play. The song was slow and gentle at first, like raindrops falling softly on a window. Then it grew stronger, filled with the feelings she couldn't put into words. When the song ended, the teacher didn't speak for a while. Then he whispered, "You just played something more powerful than anything I've taught." A few days later, the teacher showed that recording to the school director. The director was a strict woman who didn't like surprises. When she heard that a street girl was sneaking in to play, she wasn't pleased at first. But when she listened to the recording, she grew quiet. "This is her?" she asked. The teacher nodded. The director looked out the window for a moment and said, "She's talented. But we can't have outsiders coming in without permission." The teacher didn't give up. "Please," he said. "She deserves a chance. She's not asking for money or lessons. Just let her play. You'll see." After a long pause, the director agreed, but with a condition. "She can come for a short time each week. I'll give her a small trial. If she shows discipline, maybe we'll think about helping her more. When the teacher told the girl, she could hardly believe it. You mean, I can come here like the other students? She asked. He nodded. Yes, but you must be serious about it. No giving up, she promised. That first day, she came dressed in her cleanest clothes. The other students looked at her curiously. Some whispered to each other, wondering why a street girl was allowed inside their school. She tried not to notice. She focused on the piano instead. During the short lesson, the teacher asked her to play what she knew. The room fell silent as soon as she began. The melody was full of emotion, something that no amount of training could create. When she finished, even the students who had whispered earlier looked at her differently. They couldn't believe someone with no lessons could play like that. From then on, she became a quiet mystery in the school. Some admired her while others felt jealous. But she didn't care. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there for the music. The teacher gave her simple tasks, learning scales, trying to read a bit of music, but she still preferred to play by ear. She learned faster that way. Her connection to the piano wasn't about rules or books. It was about feeling. She played how her heart guided her. At night, when the others left, she stayed behind sometimes, still sneaking in a few extra minutes of practice with the janitor's help. The janitor always said, "Don't forget where you started. That corner outside the window. That's where your dream began." She would nod and smile, grateful for his kindness. Weeks turned into months. Her name began to spread quietly around the school. Even students from other classes came to peek through the door when she played. There was something different about her music. It wasn't just skill. It was emotion. Every note carried a story. One afternoon, as the teacher was locking up, he received a notice about an upcoming city-wide piano competition. It was a big event, judges, audience, and students from all major schools. He looked at the paper, then at the girl practicing nearby. "Would you ever want to play on stage?" he asked. She stopped, startled. "Me? In front of people?" "Yes," he said. "You could show them what you can do." Her eyes widened. "But they'll laugh. I'm not like them." He smiled gently. "They might laugh at first, but once you start playing, they'll listen." The idea scared her, but it also lit a spark inside. That night, as she walked home, she imagined standing in front of a crowd, playing her heart out. She could almost hear the applause, see the lights, feel the piano beneath her fingers. She didn't know if she was ready, but she knew one thing for sure. She wanted to try. The next day, she told the teacher, "If you help me, I'll do it." He smiled proudly. "Then let's begin." From that moment, her quiet nights of secret practice turned into real preparation. The janitor, the teacher, and the girl all shared one dream now, to show the world the power of a heart that refused to give up. Little did they know, the sound of her first melody had already started a journey that would touch countless hearts. The day of the competition came faster than anyone expected. The girl had been practicing every single day for weeks, sometimes until her fingers hurt, but she never complained. Each note she played carried her hope, her fear, and her memories. She had never been part of anything so big before. The idea of performing in front of a crowd made her stomach twist, but deep down she also felt excited. This was her chance to show everyone what she had inside. That morning, she woke up early. The sky was still dark, but she couldn't sleep anymore. She washed her face with cold water, tied her hair back, and put on the only dress she owned that didn't have any holes. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean. She looked at herself in a small cracked mirror and whispered, "You can do this." At the music school, the teacher was already waiting for her. He gave her a reassuring smile. "Nervous?" he asked. She nodded. "A little." "Good," he said. "That means you care." The janitor wished her luck too, handing her a small paper bag. Inside was a sandwich and a note that said, "No matter what happens, play your heart out." She smiled softly, holding the bag like it was something precious. When they reached the concert hall, she froze for a moment. It was huge. The seats stretched far back, and the stage lights shone brightly even though it was daytime. Dozens of other contestants were walking around, some tuning their instruments, others practicing quickly on imaginary keyboards. Most of them wore expensive clothes, their hair perfectly done. She felt small among them. The teacher noticed her silence. "Don't look at them," he said gently. "Look at the piano. That's all that matters." Her name wasn't on the official list at first because she had joined at the last minute. The organizers hesitated when they saw her. "Is she a student here?" one of them asked doubtfully. The teacher nodded firmly. "Yes, she's with me." They looked at her worn shoes and simple dress but didn't argue further. She was given the last spot on the list. While waiting backstage, she watched other performers go up one by one. They played fast, technical pieces, full of skill and confidence. The audience clapped politely after each performance. Some of the players bowed proudly, while others looked disappointed. The girl kept her eyes on the stage, studying how they moved, how they breathed before touching the keys. Then came her turn. A voice called her name through the speakers. Her hands started shaking. She looked at the teacher, who gave her a nod of encouragement. "Remember," he whispered, "you're not here to impress them. You're here to share your story." She walked slowly to the stage. The lights were blinding at first, and she could barely see the audience, but she could feel their eyes on her. Some people whispered. She heard someone chuckle quietly, and her heart sank a little. She knew they saw only a poor street girl who didn't belong here. She sat on the bench, placed her fingers on the keys, and closed her eyes. For a moment, the world went silent. She took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The first notes were soft and hesitant, like a whisper. The judges leaned forward slightly, not expecting much. But as the melody grew, something changed. The sound filled the room, rich and deep. Every note carried emotion. Pain, hope, love, loss, all mixed together. It was as if she was telling her life story through the piano. The laughter stopped. The whispers faded. Even the judges stopped writing on their papers. Everyone just listened. The melody turned gentle, then powerful, rising like a wave and falling again. It was raw and real. Some people in the audience closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others sat frozen, unable to look away. The teacher stood at the side of the stage, tears forming in his eyes. He had heard her play many times before, but never like this. This was different. This was her soul speaking. When the final note faded into silence, the hall remained still. For a few long seconds, no one moved. Then, slowly, people began to clap, softly at first, then louder. Some even stood up. The judges looked at each other, their faces filled with surprise. She lifted her hands from the keys, breathing hard. Her eyes were wet, though she didn't know why. Maybe because, for the first time, she felt seen. The applause grew louder, echoing through the hall. The teacher smiled proudly from the side, and even the janitor, who had snuck in quietly through a back door, wiped his eyes. When she stood up, she bowed awkwardly, unsure what to do. The lights felt warm on her face. She didn't see it, but one of the judges had tears in her eyes. The oldest judge, a man with gray hair, leaned forward and whispered something to the others. After she left the stage, the teacher hugged her tightly. "You did it," he said, his voice trembling. "You really did it." She smiled shyly. "Do you think they liked it?" He laughed softly. "They didn't just like it. They felt it." Backstage, a few of the other contestants looked at her differently now. Some smiled, others looked confused or even a little jealous. But she didn't care. She had played from her heart, and that was enough. Later, when the judges came out to announce the results, the hall went silent again. The names were called one by one. Third place went to a boy from another academy. Second place to a girl in a bright red dress. Then the announcer paused before reading the final name. "And the winner is," he began, glancing at the paper, "the young pianist who played last." The room erupted with applause. The girl looked around, unsure what to do. The teacher nudged her gently toward the stage. She walked back out, dazed, as people stood and clapped. The gray-haired judge handed her a small golden trophy and said, "Music isn't always about perfect notes. It's about honesty. You reminded us of that today." She took the trophy in her hands, staring at it as if it were something unreal. The audience kept clapping, but all she could hear was the sound of her heart beating fast. After the ceremony, people came up to congratulate her. Some asked for pictures, others for her name. The director of the music school stood proudly nearby, realizing she had been wrong to doubt the girl. When the crowd finally thinned out, the teacher and the janitor met her outside the hall. The city lights glowed around them, and the air was cool. She held the trophy close, smiling quietly. "You were amazing," the janitor said. "I told you the piano would tell your story one day." She laughed softly. "It did more than that. It gave me a new one." The teacher looked at her with a proud smile. "This is just the beginning," he said. "People will want to hear you again." But she shook her head. "I don't want fame," she said softly. "I just want to keep playing." They walked together through the quiet streets, the sounds of the city fading behind them. She thought about how everything had changed. And yet, deep down, she was still the same girl who had once watched the piano from the corner outside the window. That night, she went back to that same corner. The cold wind brushed against her face, but it didn't bother her anymore. She set the small trophy beside her and looked up at the stars. Her heart felt light. She closed her eyes and imagined the piano keys under her fingers. Even without the instrument, she could still hear the melody in her mind. The same one she had played in the hall, the one that had made people cry. For her, that song wasn't about winning. It was about being heard. In the days that followed, stories about her performance spread quickly. People called her the street pianist. Reporters came to the school asking for interviews, but she was shy and avoided attention. She just wanted to keep learning, to grow, to make music that touched people's hearts. The teacher helped her apply for a scholarship so she could stay at the school properly. The director approved it without hesitation this time. Even some of the students who had once whispered behind her back now treated her with respect. Yet she never let it change her. She still helped the janitor clean after class. She still smiled at everyone she met. She still played the same old piano in the empty room, the one that had been her friend from the beginning. Sometimes, when she played alone, she would hear footsteps outside the door, people stopping to listen quietly. And every time she smiled, because that's what she had always wanted, to make people feel something through her music. The competition had given her more than a trophy. It had given her a place in the world. And though she didn't know what the future would bring, she knew one thing for sure. She would never stop playing, because somewhere deep inside, she believed that music could change everything. And for her, it already had. In the weeks after the competition, everything felt new for her. People in the city who had once walked past her without noticing now stopped and smiled. Some even pointed and whispered, "That's the girl who made the judges cry." The music school became her second home. But this time, she entered through the front door, not the side one. Still, every time she touched the piano, she remembered how it all began. On the cold street corner, with only dreams to keep her warm. The teacher and janitor watched her carefully, proud of how she stayed humble despite the sudden attention. She spent more hours practicing than ever before, but she never treated it like a job. For her, it was still magic. Every time her fingers touched the keys, she felt like she was speaking a language only the piano understood. People started visiting the school asking to hear her play. Some were reporters, some were music lovers, and a few were just curious about the street girl pianist. She didn't like all the attention, but she never turned anyone away. She would sit quietly, play a few songs, smile shyly when they clapped, and then go back to her lessons. The director began to see what the teacher had seen from the start. One afternoon, she called the girl into her office. "You've brought a lot of light to this school," she said. "Would you like to stay here permanently? We can give you a scholarship and proper training." The girl's eyes widened. "Really? I can stay?" The director nodded with a soft smile. "Yes, you've earned it." That evening, when she told the janitor, he chuckled and said, "See? I told you this place would be your home someday." She laughed and hugged him tightly, grateful for everything he had done. As weeks turned into months, her music improved even more. She learned to read notes slowly, but she never lost her natural style. The teacher encouraged her to keep her own touch because that was what made her special. "Technique can be taught," he said once, "but soul can't. And you have that." Her performances became a regular part of school events. Every time she played, the audience listened silently, moved by her emotion. It didn't matter if it was a small group of students or a hall full of people. Her music always carried the same warmth. But not everyone was kind. Some students felt jealous of her quick rise. One day, while she was practicing alone, two older students passed by and whispered loudly, "She's not even that good. People just feel sorry for her." She stopped playing but didn't say anything. When they left, she sat quietly for a while, then started again. This time playing even softer, as if to remind herself that music wasn't about proving anything. It was about feeling. The teacher found her later and noticed her quietness. "Don't let their words stay in your mind," he said. "You don't owe anyone an explanation. Let your music speak for you." She nodded, holding back tears, and kept practicing. A few weeks later, a famous pianist visited the school to give a workshop. Everyone was excited. When it was her turn to play for him, the girl felt nervous again, just like at the competition. She played one of her original songs, the same one that had made the judges cry. The guest pianist listened intently, then said, "You play from your heart. That's something you can't teach." He offered to mentor her occasionally, helping her shape her gift into something even greater. That moment felt like a new door opening in her life. She accepted the offer with gratitude, promising herself she would never forget where she came from. Life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. She went to school during the day, practiced in the evenings, and sometimes performed at small local events. The teacher always stood by her side, guiding her with patience and kindness. The janitor never missed a single performance, sitting quietly in the back row, always the first to clap. One day, after a concert, a woman approached her. She looked well-dressed but had tears in her eyes. "You remind me of someone I lost," the woman said softly. "Your music, it touched something deep inside me. Thank you." Moments like that reminded the girl why she played. Not for trophies or applause, but to reach hearts. As time went on, she became more confident but never proud. When reporters asked about her story, she always said the same thing. "It wasn't luck. It was kindness. People believed in me when they didn't have to." Those words touched even more people. Months later, the teacher received a letter from a National Music Foundation. They had heard about the girl's story and wanted her to audition for a scholarship program abroad. When he told her, she was speechless. "Another competition?" she asked nervously. He smiled. "Something like that. But this time, it's not about winning. It's about growing." The idea of leaving the city scared her. This had been her world. The streets, the piano room, the faces she knew. She spent a long time thinking about it. Finally, she decided to try. "If I don't go," she said to the teacher, "I'll always wonder what could have been." Before leaving, she visited all the places that had shaped her journey. The street corner where she used to sit, the bakery where the owner sometimes gave her leftover bread, the quiet hall where she had first played the piano. She thanked each one silently. The janitor gave her a small wooden keychain carved in the shape of a piano. "So you never forget where it all started," he said with a smile. She hugged him, promising to come back someday. The day she left, the whole school gathered to say goodbye. The teacher told her, "The world is full of noise, but people like you bring music to it." Tears filled her eyes as she looked around the hall one last time. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me." As the bus pulled away, she stared out the window, clutching the small piano keychain. The road stretched ahead, full of unknown turns, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She had her music, and that was enough. In her heart, she carried the same melody she had played on the night of the competition. She knew she would play it again someday, in another place, for new faces. And maybe, just maybe, They would feel what those judges once felt, the truth, the pain, the beauty hidden in every note. Far behind her, the city lights faded, but the sound of the piano stayed alive inside her. It was more than just an instrument now, it was her voice, her past, her future. And as the bus moved farther away, she smiled quietly, ready to begin the next chapter of her song. Months turned into years, and the girl's journey took her far from the city where it had all begun. The scholarship she earned opened doors she never imagined. She now lived in a small apartment near a grand conservatory, where every hallway echoed with the sound of music. At first, it felt overwhelming. Everyone around her seemed so confident, so perfect. Their fingers danced across the keys like they were born for it. She sometimes wondered if she really belonged there. But every time she sat at a piano, her doubts faded. The same warmth filled her heart, the same feeling she had on the night of the competition. The music reminded her of who she was and where she came from. She didn't play to compete anymore. She played to connect. The teachers at the conservatory quickly noticed her unusual style. She didn't always follow rules or sheet music exactly. Instead, she added her own touches, soft pauses, small changes, deep emotion. One of her instructors said, "You play as if each note carries a memory." And in a way, it did. Every sound she made was a piece of her story. The streets, the hunger, the kindness of strangers, the joy of being heard. Despite the success, she missed her old city often. She thought of the janitor, the kind teacher, the little music room that had changed her life. Sometimes, when she was alone in her apartment, she took out the small wooden piano keychain the janitor had given her and smiled. It reminded her that no matter how far she went, she carried her roots within her. Years later, she was invited to perform at an international piano festival. It was the biggest event of her life. Famous musicians from all over the world were going to be there, along with hundreds of listeners. She hesitated at first, afraid she wasn't ready for such a stage. But then she thought about the girl she used to be, the one who had once played on a street corner, unnoticed. That memory gave her courage. The day of the performance arrived. The hall was enormous, filled with people wearing elegant clothes. The lights shone brightly on the stage, just like the first time she had performed. As she walked out, the audience grew silent. She sat down at the piano, took a deep breath, and closed her eyes. She began to play. Not a classical piece, not a famous tune, but her own composition. A song she had written over the years, built from pieces of her life. It started gently, like the sound of raindrops falling on an empty street. Then it grew, carrying the echo of laughter, tears, and memories. It was a song of struggle and hope, of loneliness and kindness. As the melody swelled, she thought of the teacher who had believed in her, the janitor who had given her warmth, and the audience that had once cried at her music. Every emotion she had ever felt flowed through her fingers into the keys. The people listening could feel it. Some leaned forward, others closed their eyes. By the time she reached the final notes, the hall was silent, completely still. When the sound faded, there was a long pause. Then, one by one, people began to clap. The applause grew until the entire hall was on its feet. Tears filled her eyes. She bowed deeply, her heart full. It wasn't about fame or awards. It was about the journey that had brought her there. After the performance, she was surrounded by people who wanted to congratulate her, ask questions, and take pictures. But in the middle of all the noise, she heard a familiar voice. "You've come a long way, haven't you?" She turned around. It was her old teacher. His hair was grayer now, but his eyes still had the same warmth. She smiled through her tears and hugged him tightly. "You came all this way?" He laughed softly. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. You're living the dream we all saw in you." She handed him the small bouquet of flowers she had received and said, "You should have these. You helped me grow." Later that evening, they sat in a quiet cafe near the concert hall. She told him about her new life, her lessons, and her dreams. He listened proudly, nodding with every word. Before leaving, he said something that stayed with her forever. "You see, when you play, people don't just hear music. They remember what it means to feel alive." When she returned to her apartment that night, she placed her trophy from the festival next to the old one she had 1 year ago. Two symbols from two different worlds, but both carried the same meaning. She opened the window, letting the cool night air fill the room. Somewhere in the distance, a street performer was playing a guitar. The sound made her smile. She sat at her piano and began to play softly. The melody was gentle and calm, like a whisper to the night. As she played, memories came back to her. Sleeping under streetlights, watching through dusty windows, her first touch of the piano keys, and the faces of everyone who had helped her along the way. The more she played, the more peaceful she felt. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about truth, about sharing her soul through sound. In the months that followed, she started a small program to teach music to children from poor families. She saw herself in every shy smile, every hesitant hand on the keys. She told them stories about how music had changed her life, and every time, she ended with the same words: "It doesn't matter where you come from. What matters is what you carry inside." The children adored her. Some of them practiced day and night, hoping to follow in her footsteps. She encouraged them not to chase fame, but to find their own voices through music. Years later, one of those children stood on a stage, nervous but determined, much like she had once been. And as that child played, she watched from the audience with tears in her eyes. The circle had come full. Her story spread far and wide, inspiring many who had almost given up. She became known not just as a great pianist but as a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the quietest voice can move the world when it carries truth. But through all the recognition and respect, she remained the same humble person. She still played with her eyes closed, still felt every note deeply, still remembered the smell of the old piano room and the sound of rain on the city streets. Sometimes, when she was alone late at night, she would sit by her window, look up at the stars, and whisper a thank you to the streets that taught her strength, to the people who showed her kindness, and to the music that gave her life meaning. Her fingers would trace the little wooden piano keychain hanging by the window, worn smooth from years of touch. It reminded her that miracles often start in the simplest places. And somewhere, far away, another little girl sat on a corner, humming a tune softly to herself, not knowing that her voice would one day echo across hearts, just like the street girls once did. The melody never truly ended. It lived on, not only in her hands but in the hearts of everyone who had ever heard her play. And as long as there were people willing to listen, the song, the story would keep going forever.